Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News Podcast. I'm Ray Sidney-Smith,
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
and we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. This is episode 22, and we're recording this on September 11th, 2020. Each week, we cover the productivity news headlines of the week so you know what's going on in the current tools, research, services, products, and more in the world of personal productivity. This week, we're going to be covering a story about IFT going pro. But first, let's talk about the headlines. Augusto, what's our first headline this week?
First headline is Google Maps for Apple Watch is now live in the latest update. And that is a big deal. That having the map on the watch, on the Apple Watch, is really, really cool. But so far, you have been really limited to Apple Maps. So for those people who live on the Google ecosystem, it's really cool to see that the Google Maps is now going to be able to give you that turn by turn into the watch and give you those directions. So I think that is an incredible good news for everybody.
Next up, we have a story out of Slashdot that talks about Windows 10 themes being able to be abused to grab Windows passwords. And so this is just kind of a note to folks to be careful with the download of theme packs and themes in Windows 10. These are files that have a .theme extension. The .theme extension, those are inside usually your themes folder in your Microsoft Windows directory. So just be mindful of the fact that those can actually be used to do what's called a pass the hash attack. And so those can, of course, send credentials to attackers who can then log in as you in your system. So Windows is obviously aware of this and hopefully will push out a fix to it in one of their next patch Tuesdays, or maybe they'll push out an emergency patch before then. But it is an issue that we all have to be mindful of. So, of course, check your themes folder to make sure there aren't any errant themes, files in there that you don't remember installing yourself.
So the next step is an article from the ladders. I tried the 5 right productivity hacks, and here is what happened. The first technique is a Pomodoro, and we have discussed the Pomodoro on Productivity Cast, and it is a really great technique and useful. So the second one was checklist, single tasking, personal Kanban, and then early to rise. That was really interesting as a person who even wrote a book about it, 4 a.m., an argument for productivity, and how much effect getting early produce, and especially for the people now which dynamics are changing. People is at the home. If I used to believe that waking early will give you an advantage, now that people is at home all day and they are your coworkers, it's work waking up earlier to be able to get ahead and plan, and all that is even more important and more powerful. So in the case of the article, the writer is talking about waking up at 5 in the morning every day, including the weekends, and how, yes, it took some practice, but how incredible has been the positive effects that has had for him.
Next up is an article from Engineering News Record, and they're actually talking about the title of the article is actually Unengaged Employees Sap Companies of Productivity and Innovation. And what the author of this article really does is dig into some of the research and studies that have been recently done on the historic levels of employee engagement and productivity, and that is the historic highs and the historic lows, based on how companies are really working with their employees to both engage them and be both diverse and inclusive. And that it really kind of covers on how important it is to create a work culture that fosters engagement. And it's a really interesting article. I'm not going to get into the particular details here, but it just basically says the thesis is basically that unengaged employees are, of course, unhappy, and therefore they are going to be less productive. And we know that there are some things we can do in order to increase productivity generally, and that is, of course, creating greater psychological safety. Allowing people to make mistakes, allowing them to innovate in those spaces by being able to step outside of comfort zone, and then embracing the failures of innovation so that you can learn from them. And that, of course, requires also making sure that everybody has a seat at the table. And the more diverse and inclusive and the greater you can create this sense of safety, the more innovation that is really harnessed within the culture of the organization.
Next, an article from Scientech and talking about how the productivity apps are going to be sharing and what is going to be the biggest move by 2026. A really interesting article. See the impact that really COVID-19 have not only on the productivity of the people, but also in the apps. And the article talk about the Slack, the Hootsuite, the communication, and how this how the studies are expecting a big change now that we have all this COVID and the COVID effect, and how these things are going to change significantly by 2026.
Yeah, it's remarkable the diagram they show in terms of the percentage of which companies own what. It didn't seem very representative of the study itself when you look at the actual study. So I would dig into the study itself and look at the data underpinning it. And but I think the insights are actually really interesting to think about as it relates to how the pandemic generally is going to change the productivity app market. And we know that it is going to change, and we should be thinking about that just as technologists, as productivity enthusiasts, as developers, and otherwise. And so, with that, we're going to take a break and hear a word from our sponsor this week, W3C Web Services.
Did you know half of small businesses don't have websites and half don't make it past 1 year in business? Are these stats correlated? We're not sure, but we think you should have a website. W3C Web Services provides affordable managed WordPress website hosting along with VPS, domain name registration, and other small business focused services. For listeners of this podcast, you can book a free 30-minute digital marketing strategy session when you purchase a new hosting plan, a $150 value. Once you purchase your new hosting plan, forward the receipt to support at w3cinc.com with the podcast title in the subject line of the email message, and we'll get you scheduled for your digital marketing strategy session. Head over to anythingbutidle.com/webhosting and get started with your small business website today. And now, back to your show.
What's our next headline, Augusto?
The next an article from a Street Insider where it talks about stress, burnout, and technical issues threaten the benefit from working from home, according to Adaptavist study. There is a study in London, claiming that the stress, the burnout, and technical issues are really going to affect the benefits of working from home. And I disagree on a lot of this article. And the reason I disagree on a lot is not because I'm denying that there is technical issues and burnout and stress, but the benefits that people have seen is going to outweigh that. Number one. Number two, the other reason we're seeing is one of the things we discovered with the pandemic is the difference between what was the professional systems and internet and speeds and all those things versus what we have in home. And that is going to start now matching up because there is going to be more and more people working from home. But things that were even more important in this study was, you know, people is feeling that learning is better, the collaboration has improved, the reduction of the politics has improved, the meetings effectiveness has improved. 42% 46% of the people had agree on that, and that is a big things. When I coach executive, that's one of the big things that are eating this executive alive are those meetings. So if you can get that massive improvement, that is a good enough reason not to bring people back.
I found it really fascinating that a third of all workers are using WhatsApp for work, and just find that fascinating and scary all at the same time. Facebook owns WhatsApp, by the way, and while they claim that it is end-to-end encrypted conversations, I just have this completely conspiratorial view here, and I don't know why, but a skepticism and a mistrust of transacting business communications over anything that is Facebook owned. But the interesting thing about the digital etiquette report that Adaptivist put out is that they identified in essence, 5 key areas of challenge for remote work. And this is good for us all to kind of think about in the sense that we need to make sure that we are paying attention to these pieces, right? Of course, there's burnout, that always on concept. It's very easy for people to overwork in a remote work environment, especially when you have an economic downturn because they're worried about losing their jobs. They're going to, of course, respond by overworking. Then, of course, there are technical challenges as it relates to getting people up to speed regarding technology, obviously dealing with communications, and then, of course, lack of clarity around how to operate in a digital environment, how to make sure that conversations and meetings and hiring and so on and so forth are done in an inclusive and equitable fashion, as well as other kinds of social interactions in a digital space. So these are all things that are unique challenges to remote work, and we can address them. They can all be addressed to actually put a positive other side to all of this. And I'm really excited to see how people go ahead and do that. Next up is a bit of news out of Todoist. They have basically added Microsoft Teams integration with Todoist. That is, Microsoft Teams now has the capability of you adding Todoist into the Microsoft Teams environment. And now you'll be able to share tasks with collaborators, and you'll be able to create your own tasks from messages from within a Microsoft Teams environment. This is going to be really, really powerful for Todoist users, and I'm looking forward to seeing how people use Todoist inside of Microsoft Teams going forward. Augusto, next up.
So there is the next two things are two news from Omnifocus. And one of them is that on the update of September 9, update OmniFocus for iOS will not longer have trials that auto-convert in any way. So now you can go test, trial, OmniFocus, but as soon as those 2 weeks end, you will not need to be thinking that, oh, I'm going to be charged or I'm going to be adding to the mailing list. OmniFocus has made the decision that it is going to be a real trial. It's 2 weeks and you walk away and see you later. And I think that's something really, really powerful and a lot good to say about the Omni Group. The second news is OmniFocus has always been a Mac application on the iOS, and they are developing this OmniFocus on the web, and it's been step by step. And finally, they add custom perspective for the OmniFocus on the web. Right now, it's on testing, but it is almost ready to go forward. And I think for the people who live on a PC who are finally using OmniFocus in this way, it's going to be fantastic. That means I can put OmniFocus on my Chromebook. I can put OmniFocus. The people who use Windows can use it on the Windows. And I think it's simply an incredible news.
Fantastic. And to close out our headlines this week, Augusto, you want to wrap us up with some news out of Apple?
Yeah, Forbes is confirming that Apple leaked the iPhone 12 date and is showing the sizes. It's going to start obviously for the iPhone 12 Pro Max, the most expensive on the line, and later on in the year they will add the cheaper products, but or the less expensive product, the smaller versions. But what we are looking is how they are going to again working with the megapixels and the article, and this is going to be a really really interesting device. At 6.7 inch is massive, but it's going to be, I think, a really powerhouse. And I'm wondering if this device for the producer will be the equivalent to what the iPad mini is for. It's going to be a little smaller than the iPad mini, but big enough to be that second take everywhere device.
Yeah, that is a ginormous screen. And I'm really curious to see whether or not it's big enough for people to be able to work on as they would say the iPad mini. Yeah, that's very large. And so with that, that closes out our headlines for this week. And that takes us on to our segment called New Tools of the Week. Augusto and I come across many personal development, time task, project management, and productivity collaboration tools throughout the week. So we use some of them. Some of them are just interesting and we think that they'd be useful to you. So, in this segment, New Tools of the Week, we each bring you a tool we think you might like. And to start us off is our first tool of the week, which is Stacks. Stacks is really unique in the sense that it is, in essence, a Trello clone. But the way in which they have designed Stacks is that you can actually download this application. It actually runs on top of Electron, and Electron is a framework that allows you to be able to create a Windows, Mac, mobile application, Linux app kind of environment very very quickly. So the developers are using this framework in order to create it. So the application gives you a pretty much a Trello type environment, except that it is not controlled by any cloud service. So you can synchronize your stacks, the boards, through your own means, Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, or otherwise. And you get all of these very interesting features. And it is just a little bit more, I don't know, it seems a little bit more raw. There are some pieces that are quite not working for me when I'm using it so far, just kind of in testing. But some really interesting things that it does is if you add a location to the cards inside of Stacks, it actually gives you a map where you can then start to see those tasks. I don't know if anyone remembers, but Evernote used to have Atlas, and you used to be able to take the geolocated metadata within the notes and be able to see your notes on top of a map. And in essence, Stacks does that here with their application. You have the ability to look at things in a calendar view, and some other kinds of what I think are really neat and interesting ways. You can use Markdown natively inside of the app. So if you are a Common Mark fan, you can go ahead and just start using your Markdown directly inside of Stacks. And so it's a powerful tool. I have to admit, if you are kind of averse to having your data in the cloud, Stacks seems like a really great way for you to be able to get most of the Trello mojo of localized without any of the power ups, without the cloud syncing, without any of those pieces, while still getting a really nice personal Kanban experience. Augusto, what's your tool of the week?
My tool of the week is called Muse. It's a tool for thought on the iPad, so you can add notes, boards, pictures, and make notes. It is really a fun, almost a vision board place, or to organize thinking and planning. You can get, I think it's the first 50 you get for free, 50 or 100, and so you can play with it for free enough. And the service costs $100 a year if you want to go above that point. But even on the free version, I on the 12.9 iPad, it is so much fun to be able to put the stuff and connect them and think about it and make notes and make other things. It's been a really, really fun thing for me to play and have fun.
And so, with that, that takes us on to our featured story this week. And as I said at the top, IFT goes pro. And so, if you guys don't know what IFT is, it stands for if this, then that. And it is a workflow automation tool. So, it's a cloud service that allows you to be able to connect different tools to each other. And they call those things applets. So, for example, if you wanted to be able to tell IFT every time I post a Twitter tweet and it has a photo in it, I want you to take that image file, and place that into Google Drive inside of a folder in Google Drive for me. IFT can do those kinds of things, right? So if this happens, then do that. And it's been free for all these years. And now IFT has moved over to a paid service, and they are basically giving people the ability to have up to 3 IFT applets for free. And then above that, people are going to have to upgrade to IFT Pro. What were your thoughts about this, Augusto? And what other details did I miss?
One of the details is that the price it can be set up. Their goal is to eventually get to the 9.99, but they're even allowing people according to Tibbets, to go to the lowest price of 1.99. So that is an interesting approach to letting people define what is going to be that price. That was really, really interesting for me to see that they allow that. Other than that, I think it's a really, really interesting And hopefully, with that, what they're going to be able to do is to get more people to adopt the IFT. I think it's an incredible service, but I know for some people, it is seen in some places as more technically or more geeky than what really is.
Yeah, I find that IFT is really the simple version of Zapier. And now IFT Pro is giving you the ability to have reduced latency, meaning that you're going to have a speedier step to actions, but also that you're actually going to be able to create multiple actions for one particular trigger, right? So you can say, if I post this Twitter image, then I want you to put the image inside of this Google Drive folder and put this image in an email and email it to myself and X and Y and Z, right? So, really interesting to see how they are kind of leveling up in this way. Plus, from my perspective, as I was telling you before the recording, I immediately upgraded to IFT Pro as soon as I saw the notice in my system. I use IFT for so many things in my personal life related to IoT, and I use Zapier, in my business world. So both of those tools represent my personal and professional automations, and so I have no problem with supporting the companies that are really doing so much for me in terms of being productive. So those who have existing branded applets, I'm quoting here from Stacy on IoT's blog post on this, and she says that those who have existing branded applets that are already created and will continue to keep going. And then you can have up to 3 custom applets, and so therefore, once you want to go above that or change any branded applet into a custom applet, then you will need to upgrade to Pro. So it seems as though some people are going to be grandfathered in until they make any changes to their applets. So that's kind of nice. But otherwise, people are going to be enforced or forced into the upgrade if they want to go ahead and do that. So that's a pretty good deal, I have to say. I'm pretty happy about it. It also means that IFT is going to be sustainable into the future. I don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to be able to handle my IoT automations going forward, because they're going to have a sustainable business model to be able to do that. So I'm good and happy all around. Anything else?
Yes, the last thing we have is the announcement that Apple will have a new event, Time Flies, on September 15, the day after this, the day after this gets published, and we will cover that event. And hopefully, we will make a special event for this and announce what was announced and what is coming.
Look out tomorrow or the following day for another special episode from us this week on the Apple event that's going to be happening on September 15th. And so, with that, we are coming to a close. Please let us know if there's a story we missed. We place any extra stories that we come across but don't discuss in the episodes in our extra section in the show notes. So, if you visit the podcast website, go to the episode for today, and you'll find the extras in the show notes. But if we did miss a story, use our contact page on anythingbutidle.com and let us know. You can also tweet or DM us on Twitter at anythingbutidle. You can go ahead and tweet or DM us there. Feel free to follow us on social media, including on Twitter. You can find all those links to us on anythingbutidle.com. And if you can, please leave a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. If your favorite podcast app for some reason allows giving feedback, feel free to leave the rating review there as well. And thank you for helping us grow the Anything But Idle audience. Finally, thanks for listening to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News podcast. Until next time, here's to your productive life.